Hi all, today we're going to be trying to make fire in the rain. I've been waiting for a day that's been suitable to do this video for quite some time, and today is that day. It is absolutely teeming down, and it has been for the past few hours and doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. Temperature wise, it's just above freezing. It's 1 degree up here, 1 degree Celsius, so it's just hovering above freezing. And I actually think this rain has a touch of sleet to it, so I'm actually hoping it doesn't turn into snow. But just to give you an idea how much rain, here's the wee rivers along the edge of the side of the road. Those are normally nothing more than a trickle. It's cold, it's wet, that's going to make it very tough for lighting a fire. Everything is going to be very, very wet, very soaked. So our priority is to find dry wood, but that's going to be the challenge. That's the difference between getting a fire lit in these sort of conditions and not getting one lit. Between being successful and not being successful. And the thing about fires is that they're always easy to light when you don't really need them, and they're always at their most difficult to light when you do really need them. On days like this, when it's cold and it's wet, these are the times you need a fire, but these are the times when it's most challenging to successfully get a fire lit. I'm going to get myself into the forest and get this process started. Now, your number one priority in conditions like this, when it's just constant rain, is to get some kind of a cover up to cover that fire, because without it you're going to be fighting a losing battle, really. Because when the rain is this heavy, it's just any dry sticks you have, you take them out, they're instantly soaked. So it is an absolute priority to get some kind of covering up. That covering can be a poncho, a rain jacket, natural materials around you, any kind of material really, anything that will provide a covering from the rain to keep the rain off your fire. In this instance, what I'm going to use is I have a lightweight rain poncho there, and I'm going to throw that up. I think that's something that's quite likely to have in this kind of scenario where you're out caught in heavy rain. And it's important also that you keep that covering, keep it high above your fire. Something like that will melt easily with sparks and so on, so keep it a good distance, 6 to 8 foot above the fire. You don't want it so high that the rain's going to get blown in on top of that, but you want it high enough that the fire isn't going to melt it once it gets going. Now the next job is getting wood and getting the right kind of wood. We need to find dry wood, and that's the biggest challenge now in a rain drenched forest, is finding dry wood, especially for the kindling to get the fire going. But we'll go now and we'll go and get some wood to get this thing going. Finding dry wood in these conditions can be extremely challenging. Your best bet is to try and find some dead wood of a reasonable thickness. When I say reasonable thickness, I'm talking about the width of your fist here. So something around that at a minimum. And the reason for that is more than likely the centre of that wood, the middle part is going to be dry. The outer part might be wet, but the inner will be dry, and that's what you're looking for, especially for that kindling to get the fire going. As always, I'm always looking for a good dead standing tree. Now, in these conditions, the persistent rain, they're still going to be wet on the outside, but the key is that they're going to be dry on the inside. So we have a wee dead standing tree here, and just to confirm that it is dead, completely dead and dead standing, we can just take our knife and do a little nick into the wood like that there. And if there's no green or no sap, then you know that tree is dead. So this is a perfect tree for the job here, so I'm going to cut this down, get into the job then of processing it and get into that core wood, that dry wood. Anyway, another primary source of moisture in your stick is going to be the bark. It keeps the rain and water out of the core of the stick to a degree, up to a point, but it's like the last thing to lose the moisture also. So what you want to do is try and remove as much of the bark as you can, especially on any kindling or tinder or anything like that. Just get rid of the bark straight away. Wherever you're going to have your fire, wherever you're going to place it on the ground, try and raise it up somewhat off the very, very wet ground. Now it doesn't have to be dry sticks or whatever that you use to raise it up, but as long as it's raised up, whatever you used is raised up off the wet ground. That will just increase the possibility of your fire staying lit. Because if you have light a fire directly on the wet ground, it goes down, it gets to that point where it's very wet, the whole thing's going to be soaked, and all your embers and everything else are going to soak up all the moisture from the wet ground, and it's going to be very hard to keep that fire alive. So something like this here is perfectly fine. This is just old logs that I had from a previous fire, and I've just used a log at the back there to sort of set it up and raise the whole thing off the ground. What I'm going to do now is place my fire on here, start building my fire on there, and then it's off all this very saturated wet moss and whatnot. Apologies again, if the camera's not clear with rain and whatnot. It's just very hard here today to keep everything right, camera and video wise. So this is my most important piece of wood for getting this fire going. Well, it's one of the most important pieces. I've taken a section from around about the middle of that trunk, and I'm going to cut this down now. I've debarked it, removed that wet bark, and I'm going to split it into the smallest little bits I can, and that'll be my kindling. And I'm going to do it under the tarp here, and that's it. You want to do that, you want to do this under cover if possible, because you want to avoid getting the sticks from this wet. The core of this should be bone dry or close to bone dry, and you want to keep those sticks as dry as you can. If they get exposed to rain, it'll just suck it up like a sponge, and it's going to make lighting your fire 10 times harder. And a good way to test the moisture content of any sticks or any logs like that is to use your lips. They'll feel moisture quicker than you will in your fingers. And it's relatively safe to do that, then the core of those sticks is pretty clean. So those are bone dry. The internal of that is bone dry. So I'm going to continue on now, splitting this down. Get them down to around that there, and they should take a flame pretty good. Splitting down the initial logs like this will give you a nice bed of dry timber to get your fire started off. So I've got my wood processed down, done it under the tarp to keep it dry, have it raised up off the ground, off the wet ground. These logs are not dry, they're wet, but they're going to not soak up any more moisture and kill the fire. My exposed dry wood here for the bed of the fire, and I'm pretty much ready to light this. So even as you can see, just even cutting those down, dirt gets on them, moisture gets on them. It's really, really hard in these conditions to keep things dry. That's why having the shelter up is one of the most important parts of this. My preferred method of getting a fire going, as you probably know, is cotton pads and petroleum jelly, in this case Vaseline. It's important in these conditions also not to be shy with this petroleum jelly. Put plenty on, good blob like that. The more you have on there, the longer it's going to burn and the hotter it's going to burn. And then select your driest sticks to surround this. I'll just leave it at that for now, see if it takes off. And I have a couple of wee sticks there just in case I need to add those on. But so far it's looking pretty good. It's starting to take off nicely. The wood itself is starting to light. And you can probably hear the fire as there's the sizzling going on there, and that is from the bark, from the wetness of the bark. And there will probably be a small bit of moisture towards the outer edge of those sticks as well. And for anyone in any doubt as to how wet it is in here, I'll show you the ground here a few feet from the fire. So there you have it, lighting a fire in the rain. As always, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.